Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Alyeska Pipeline Service Company, fueling philanthropic programs and dedicated to creating educational and professional opportunities for Alaska Native people.
The National Weather Service.
Good Wednesday, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with you from the National Weather Service. It is the 19th of October, and as always, we encourage you to stay up to date on your local weather information. The easiest way to do that for most people is going to the website, weather.gov/Alaska. However, if you turn on the Marine Band, you can listen to the weather forecast there for your nearest transmitter. You can always call us at the Weather Info line, 800-472-0391. And if you have some questions about the weather forecast, we encourage you to contact your local weather service office, but you can certainly email us as well, and we'll gladly reply. nws.ar.tvweather@noaa.gov, or email me personally. I'd love to see your weather pictures from your part of Alaska and share them with everyone else right here on Alaska Weather. As a reminder, if you're watching on ARCS, you're watching us live. If you are watching on KUAC 9.4, you're watching us live as well. UAF TV, we're happy to have you there. 360 North will be seen a little bit later this week, tomorrow and Friday especially, I think, as special coverage of the Alaska Federation of Natives continues. AFN's a really big deal in Alaska, and hello to everyone watching and participating in AFN this week. If you're looking for Alaska Weather, it's going to be a little bit later on in the evening there, but it will not be canceled and left off of 360 North's coverage, and we appreciate them working us into the schedule and working with AFN to make sure that both arenas are covered for the rest of the week. It's a really, really important thing. The Alaska Public Media, of course, you can watch us 5 o'clock the following morning or on YouTube. Go to AKwx TV. And why is weather so important this week? Not only has it been windy in southeastern Alaska with gusts over 70 miles per hour in Heidelberg and periods of some heavy rain there and gusty conditions that continued through this evening, but the second part of that is the cold air coming in behind it. And this is what we're seeing for South Central. Anchorage and Mat-Su valleys starting tomorrow night, Thursday night into Friday morning. Precipitation will begin as rain and snow and then change to all snow. So if you are a Susitna Valley commuter that moves southward into Anchorage, or you have to go even further northward, or you drive the Glen Highway in and out of the Copper River Basin, or perhaps coming in from Gulkana, you're going to find some winter weather as we get into Thursday night and Friday. Icy conditions will be possible as roads may be wet, and there will certainly be getting colder. So this is Anchorage and Mat-Su. All this begins Thursday night. But if you're in the Copper River Basin, precipitation will begin as all snow as we get into Thursday night and then Friday morning. Going through Thompson Pass, expect blowing snow and probably some icy roads there. Rain and snow mix is expected around the Valdez proper area. But there's more. If you're in the Fairbanks area, chances are you're going to see your snow developing tomorrow afternoon. A trace to, well, maybe 1 to 2 inches is possible in the area. So if you're still coming in for AFN, or you're going to leave a little early, plan on winter weather conditions in the Middle Tanana Valley and around the Fairbanks area as well. Not to mention, it's just going to be cold. Here's a look at the satellite picture. Low pressure across the western Gulf, clearly wrapping in that moisture, just spiraling right in there, throwing in some drier air to southeast. The strongest winds have been working through today along the outer southwestern coastline of southeastern Alaska. Places like Heidelberg, Craig, and Klawock have been some of the windiest. Out across the areas just north of, just in the northern Gulf and outside of Prince William Sound, you can see another wave of low pressure right about here. Watch for that to kind of develop and swing right into Prince William Sound. That is continuing rainfall around the north and western Gulf and gusty conditions there as well. As this is working its way, kind of spiraling around the Gulf Coast, we're going to draw in another wave of low pressure that's going to set up across the central and western part of Prince William Sound. It's going to put it in pretty good position to generate that possibility of snow for south central Alaska. So a kind of an early season, about the right time of season, I guess, for snowfall in Anchorage. Some places already saw a little bit the other day, but up and down the Glen Highway and the Parks Highway, as well as into the Copper River Basin, it does look like there will be that potential for not only hazardous driving conditions, but certainly some winter weather for the mid to late month. A look up north also shows the next impulse of colder air working its way toward the middle Tanana Valley. So we have the moisture in place. Now we need the cold air there, and that's what's working in tomorrow. So watch for conditions to change if you're in the middle Tanana Valley out toward North Pole and eastward as the evening goes on. Up north, snow showers there for north and western parts of the Chukchi Coast. Saw a little bit of snow on the north slope today, and another wave of low pressure just kind of hanging out here across the central and northern parts of the Bering Sea will keep the clouds and the snow showers possible, at least for the next couple days. Here's a look at the surface map. Here's the occlusion sitting across the north and eastern Gulf, and this is what's kind of pushing all that air through southeastern Alaska at a pretty rapid pace right now. Rainfall continues in Kodiak after seeing a little bit of snow there yesterday, and also watching for some light snow up around Ambler and Bettles, as well as Barrow all the way down toward Wainwright and Point Hope and Point Lay. As we get in through tonight, watch for periods of light snow to continue across the Chukchi Coast, snow showers inland and south of the Brooks Range summits. A frontal boundary lingering just west of Fairbanks and out across places like Minchumina and west of the Alaska Range will prevent the bulk of that cold air from moving in. But once we get into tomorrow, that's probably going to drop southward quickly, and with that comes that developing chance for snow in Fairbanks. Watch for rain to continue around the Gulf Coast and for areas along the Kenai Peninsula and Prince William Sound, with snow showers developing around Northway and southward into the Copper River Basin. Another wave of low pressure across the central chain at 1,006 millibars will be creeping eastward, and you can see that falls apart and gets absorbed into the greater system here. But this is the wave of low pressure that's going to move eastward during the day on Thursday, starting to change the weather for the Susitna corridor, the Susitna Valley and the Matanuska Valley, as well as areas around Anchorage and Prince William Sound. Up north, snow will be falling across parts of the middle Tanana Valley and westward, as well as parts of Norton Sound, and rain and snow showers around St. Lawrence Island and north of the Bering Strait as we go through the afternoon. Rain will continue across parts of southeast. Watch for gustier winds around southern parts of southeast as we get into Friday. And we're going to keep track of thunderstorms across the outer coast there. It looks like there's still going to be enough instability in the atmosphere for showers and thunderstorms to continue across the outer coast as this next wave works another batch of warm and wet air northward. Rain will continue in southeast with periods of snow showers wrapping up on Friday for parts of south central. Snow will continue in earnest. There rain and snow again around Valdez, but Thompson Pass may be looking at snow and wind. So watch for that and blustery and slick driving conditions if you're moving up and down the Glen Highway or the Richardson or anywhere along south central roadways as we get toward the end of the week. Better chance of snow showers up north. It's going to be cold with high pressure driving that open door for winter weather right into the heart of Alaska and the west coast. Another wave of low pressure across the southern Bering Sea at 1,003 millibars shows winds should come up a little bit more for the central and eastern chain, bringing rain across the chain as we get into Friday afternoon. For southeast, 40s and 50s today. Places like Sitka were fairly mild, as well as southern southeast in the heart of the wind, but it was a warmer wind, I guess. 40s and 50s around Prince William Sound. Homer had 47, Seward 51, Kenai 42, 40 degrees early afternoon. Around Anchorage, it was 44 in Talkeetna, 17 in Golcana, and cold 26 for Fairbanks, and 32 degrees up around Eagle. Mid-teens for Fort Yukon, single digits for Anaktuvuk Pass and Arctic Valley, as well as Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse today. Cold stuff there. 14 in Kaktovik, 31 in Barrow, 20s and 30s around Kotzebue Sound, including Kivalina at 27. Same for Shish. 29 in Nome. Galena had 21. Tanana temps in the lower 20s today. Cooling down in Grayling and out toward Lake Iliamna. Pleasantly mild 50 degrees there. Bethel down to 28. As we get into Bristol Bay, you can see a remarkably different story on the other side of that front. The leading edge of colder air stopped right here into Bristol Bay, 40s and 50s. 40s and 50s for the Alaska Peninsula as well. Sandpoint, 48. And Cold Bay and False Pass also mild, close to 50 degrees. 44 for Dutch Harbor and Alaska. Low 40s for the Pribilofs and 46 way out in Shemya. Overnight low temperatures in the teens and even below zero as you get into the North Slope. Single digits and low teens there for the Beaufort Seacoast, 23 in Barrow, 20s to 30s for Kotzebue Sound. Nome's looking at 25, Unalakleet 23. Bristol Bay temperatures in the mid to upper 20s, 40s for the Chain and the Alaska Peninsula in the 30s. Kodiak Island, lower 30s for you. And most of southeast in the 30s and 40s for your morning low temperatures. As we get into the afternoon tomorrow, Teens and 20s up north around the Brooks Range, Arctic Valley or Arctic Village at 16 degrees, 14 for AKwx Pass, 20s and 30s for the North Slope, 31 around Kotzebue, 35 in Nome. Fairbanks looking at a high of only 27, 30s and 40s for South Central, but that will be cooling down as we get some snow on the ground. 30s to low 40s across the southwestern coast and for many of the villages there. Mid 40s for the Alaska Peninsula, 48 in Kodiak, and upper 40s to about 50 degrees for a large part of southeast Juneau, closer to 46. Flying weather tomorrow shows MVFR conditions to start the day around most of the Gulf Coast to about Kodiak City. IFR conditions for the northwestern coast along the Chukchi Sea, and MVFR for the central and western chain. That doesn't change much there tomorrow, and you can see IFR working its way inland across the coast and passing Barrow, so conditions should improve throughout the day. And MVFR back for southeastern Alaska tomorrow, as well as a large part of Prince William Sound and over Anchorage and the Susitna Valley. Past conditions, AKwx Pass, we expect to worsen. Conditions will lower as we go through the day toward MVFR. Same goes for Adigan Pass tomorrow. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass look to be okay for the most part. Rainy Pass, VFR conditions as we get into your Thursday. Windy Pass, we expect to see developing MVFR. It will be the western slopes that get the best chance of snow in South Central. Isabel Pass, MVFR conditions developing there, as well as Mentasta Pass. We expect to see VFR for your Thursday. Tanita Pass, MVFR conditions developing in the afternoon as snow moves into the Talkeetnas and eastward. And Portage Pass, MVFR conditions expected there with some improvement in Chilkoot and White Pass as we go through the afternoon. Cold air certainly winning the last frontier across the interior and southeast. You can see still a little bit of a battle going on with levels from 2,000 to 4,000 feet and 2,000 to 4,000 foot levels there aloft for most of the chain. A little bit of warmer air working into the western end of the chain for tomorrow morning's freezing levels. Icing potential above 1,000 up north. You might find some light to isolated moderate there. And with moisture and cold air in place across South Central, you'll have to go above 5,000 feet to find any significant light to isolated moderate potential. Low pressure is still spinning moisture and cold air right into southern and central parts of southeast. Watch for occasional moderate across mainly the southern part of the archipelago and west across the North Pacific. Another wave is working some wet and colder weather our way. The moisture will be the first to get here. The jet stream shows two areas of cold, one of them dropping south of the Bering Strait. That's what's encouraging that surface blast of colder air. And another system back behind it will be working that colder out of eastern Siberia and moving it toward Alaska as we go. So we've got moisture, we've got cold. It's really starting to look like fall, if not winter, for a good chunk of Alaska at this point. At 9,000 feet, we have a broad northwesterly flow working its way all the way across from the Gulf of Anadyr, across the eastern Bering Sea and Bristol Bay, 15 to 20 in most areas there. The northwesterly is also coming ashore for the Chukchi Coast. The trough of low pressure swinging eastward, opening more of winter's door to more parts of south central and southeastern Alaska eventually. Light winds across southeast and gentle southwesterlies from the middle Tanana Valley northward toward the Beaufort Seacoast. At 3,000 feet, winds are a little bit stronger here, 20 knot winds for most areas through the Bering Strait, across the Brooks Range and into the interior, as well as south central, with more of an east and southeasterly wind coming across the eastern Gulf. Winds are a little bit stronger just outside the Dixon entrance, 35 to 45 knots, and considerably stronger south of the Aleutians, up to 60 knots there, with southerlies returning out west. What about turbulence? Well, when you put it all together, conditions are greatly improved over today, below 4,000 feet for southern southeast. And you can see our next system's already starting to churn up the wind out across the North Pacific. Other than that, smooth sailing as far as the winds go for aviators tomorrow. That's a look at your aviation forecast. I'll be back with the rest of your marine weather here in just a few minutes.
Tucked away near Soldovia, Alaska, along beautiful Kachemak Bay, is the Kositsna Bay Laboratory, which is operated in partnership by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and the University of Alaska Fairbanks. This unique marine research and teaching laboratory is dedicated to excellence in marine science and provides a place where people can learn more about marine and coastal ecosystems. Here today to talk about the laboratory are its directors Chris Holderried and David Christie. Why is the location of the laboratory so important?
Jim, Kachemak Bay is a microcosm in many ways of southern Alaskan coastline. It has rocky coastlines, it has glaciers feeding into it, it has eelgrass beds at the head of the bay, and on the north side it has cliffs that are eroding into the bay. So we can, within just a few miles of the lab, we can access all these different types of ecosystems that live with these different environments.
So you have basically a small little world encapsulated in Kachemak Bay.
Provides a natural laboratory.
Yeah. Well, how long has the lab been around?
The lab's actually been around for as long as Alaska's been a state. It was originally constructed in 1959. There was a recognition back then that some of the same problems we face today with sustainable use of coastal resources, there were some challenges then, particularly in the herring fishery, and they saw the need for more science to understand those changes.
So who oversees the laboratory?
Well, the lab is actually run by NOAA through the National Ocean Service, and in the National Ocean Service it's part of our Coastal Ocean Science program. And then we're run in partnership with the University of Alaska Fairbanks. But one of the interesting things is we actually fall under what is called the Center for Coastal Fisheries and Habitat Research, which is another facility located in Beaufort, North Carolina. Some people say, how do you have this connection between coastal Alaska and coastal North Carolina? But if you look at the issues in both places between fishing and ecotourism and sustainable resources, and they're very, very similar. It's a pretty easy connection to make. There is one of our unique features in the lab is that there is a whole range of folks that get to use the laboratory, both from the research side and from supporting our education missions. On the research side, there's researchers from NOAA offices, from other federal agencies, from state agencies, and as well as university scientists. And from an education group, we've got college students, both undergraduate and graduate, and school children that come for field science camps.
That's outstanding. Well, describe some of the research that's being done at the laboratory.
Well, one of our main focus areas of research at the lab is how do we provide the science to sustain coastal resources. Obviously, use of coastal resources is very important in Alaska, and so how can we support that with good science? Some examples are understanding the underwater habitats and how fish and other species are using those habitats, and supporting uses like local mariculture that the oyster farmers are doing.
A lot of the research at the lab focuses around questions about how ecosystems work. How will they change in the future as temperatures potentially change? How will they change with changing amounts of sediment coming into the bay as the glaciers retreat? And in general, why are things where they are and how are they changing through time? And the particular areas that have been focused on recently in the lab are in the kelp forests, which are extensive in the bay, and of course they provide very good habitat for young fish and other animals, other organisms. And then the extensive intertidal zones. We have a 28-foot tidal range in the bay, which means between high and low tide, there's very large areas in which a wide variety of marine organisms live. As we move into the future, we'll be increasingly adding components of instrumentation to the lab, so developing and experimenting with new ways of observing and measuring what's going on underwater when people can't be there.
So what classes are being taught at the lab?
There's quite a range of classes, and it changes every year. The big constant for the last 10 years has been the dive classes. We've trained well over 100 divers in that time. Last year there were 600 scuba dives conducted out of the lab. We have a range of classes taking advantage of the access to the ecosystems of the bay. Classes on vertebrates, classes on invertebrates. We've had a climate change class there last summer, and a variety of things coming up. Some of the classes are taught by UAF professors, some are taught by our partners at University of Alaska Anchorage, and particularly the local Kenai Peninsula Community College in Homer, and also from Alaska Pacific University.
Partnerships. Can you touch on that, Chris? What partnerships have you forged to further the mission of the laboratory?
Yeah, central to how the laboratory operates is that we do most everything we do in partnership with other organizations. We're fairly limited in our federal staff. Right now we just have 2. And so to accomplish all the science missions and the education missions that NOAA wants in this area, we work obviously with the University of Alaska Fairbanks, other universities to do the education mission, as well as local marine education groups like the Center for Alaskan Coastal Studies in Homer. From a research perspective, we do a lot of work with other NOAA offices, so researchers from other NOAA offices, from in the state with the Kachemak Bay National Estuarine Research Reserve, which covers most of Kachemak Bay, and with the Alaska Department of Fish and Game. That's one of our big partners. And then nationally, we're working with other NOAA offices like the Office of Coast Survey, National Geodetic Survey, and other partners in our coastal ocean science programs.
How do you get the community involved?
Well, that's one of the really fun parts about where the laboratory is and who we get to work with. We do everything from, we have open houses for the general public. We make presentations out in the community. We also get scientists who come into the lab to do research to do presentations on their work, so they get wider exposure to that. We also have a lot of classes that are available for community members to take, as well as doing teacher training workshops and classes that teachers in the local schools, including local villages, can take. And then we do a fair amount of work with the local tribes from Seldovia, Port Graham, and Nenwalek. That's been primarily focused on education programs for the kids. Mm-hmm.
So what is your vision of the lab?
Jim, we're looking to continue to build the lab in partnership with all the people we work with around the Bay and elsewhere in Alaska to become the place where people choose to come when they have questions, so they want to investigate new ways of looking at coastal ecosystems all around southern Alaska. We want the lab in particular to be a place where we can deploy and test new technologies to see how they work in Alaskan conditions before we take them out into the rest of Alaska. And working from there, we're trying to get smarter about how we investigate coastal Alaska, because as you know, there are lots of places where you can't get to very easily, where there are no people. So we need to work out ways of developing instruments that we can put out there when there are no people around. We need to have ways to use the communities, to work with communities, to collect data that are of interest to them, but also that can be fed back to the lab and back to the world in general through the internet.
From a broad perspective, NOAA has an increasing focus on helping communities adapt to climate change. And so the lab is one of the places where we do the science to understand how these systems are changing, how they're changing now in response to climate change, in response to human activities and coastal development, things like that, and then how we can help communities to adapt to those changes in the future.
And thank you for joining us here on Alaska Weather Facts. Until next time.
Here's a look at today's sea ice edge, and you'll notice not a whole lot of changes from yesterday, but with conditions getting colder and colder in the Chukchi Sea in the next few days, not to mention, of course, the next few weeks, this area around Barrow and just north will be freezing up probably fairly quickly there. Conditions just need to settle down with the wind a little bit, but temperatures at sea and certainly the air are certainly cold enough to promote more ice growth. There is already some growth along the shore, and if you look carefully right here in Norton Sound, there's some new ice growing there along the coast. So changes to come. Weather.gov/Anchorage/ice will help you track those and sea ice concentrations and movement. For southeast, winds are settling down a little bit, but things are not quite done yet with another wave of weather working its way up from the south and the west. Expect a chance of thunderstorms across the outer coast with winds from the south and southeast 20 to 25 knots and the inside 15 to 25 knots. A northerly wind will prevail inside the Lynn Canal. Southeasterlies inside of Clarence Strait up to 25 knots with a 5-foot sea. For Friday, southeasterlies come up again south of Sitka to 35 knots, 14-foot seas there, 7 to 11-foot seas north of Cross Sound all the way to Yakutat. Northerlies inside of Lynn Canal continue, and look at the winds coming up in Clarence Strait up to 40 knots there with an 11-foot sea as we get into Friday. For south central, winds should be fairly light out of the north for Prince William Sound and parts of Cook Inlet. Westerlies still going at 25 knots west of the Barren Islands and variable easterly east of the Barrens to Kodiak Island with an easterly flow developing there at 15 knots with a 9-foot sea, 20 knots inside of Shelikof Strait. As we get into Friday, though, that colder air starts to win out the weather picture here. North and northwesterlies pick up and drain out to sea across the Barren Islands, across Kodiak Island, out of Prince William Sound, 15 to 25 and 6 to 10-foot seas there in the north and western Gulf, 3-foot seas inside of Prince William Sound and 4 to 6-foot seas inside of Cook Inlet, 9-foot seas though inside of Shelikof Strait for Friday. Bristol Bay, you're looking at northerlies at 20 knots with a 4-foot sea on Thursday. North and westerlies continue across the Alaska Peninsula with seas on either side from 4 to as high as 8 feet from Castle Cape to Chignik. Friday, a very similar weather pattern, 25 to about 30 knots or so, 6 to 8 foot seas across the Pacific and 6 foot seas from Bristol Bay down the Alaska Peninsula coastline on the Bering side. For the Aleutians, look for a light and variable wind north of Unalaska and Nikolsky, 10-knot winds with a 6-foot sea and 4 to as high as 10-foot seas there in the central Aleutians with a westerly flow from Kiska to Atka, but an easterly wind from Kiska to Shemya, 25 knots with an 11-foot sea. Southerlies pick up in earnest out west as we get into Friday in response to the next wave of weather there. East and southeasterlies moving into Adak and Atka. You'll see some slight variations on the Bering Sea coast side as that wraps into low pressure. 25 to 30 knots in most areas, 15 knots south of Unalaska and Nikolsky, and on the Bering Sea coast 4 to 8 foot seas there as we get through Friday afternoon. For the west coast, northerlies working their way down out of the Bering Strait, ushering colder weather toward the Pribilovs and everywhere else south. 20 to 25 knots there, 4 to 6 foot seas along the western coast for St. Matthew, 15-knot winds, 10-knot winds for St. Paul and St. George with a 3-foot sea on Thursday. For Friday, north and easterlies continue at 20 knots, 4 to 5 foot seas from St. Lawrence Island all the way down into the Kuskokwim Bay. Northeasterlies for St. Matthew and St. Paul and St. George with a 4-foot sea around the Pribilovs and seas as high as 4 to 5 feet north of Nunivak Island to St. Lawrence Island. And for the North Slope, north and westerlies for the Beaufort Seacoast, 10 to 15 knots, 2 to 3 foot seas. They'll be a little bit stronger for the Chukchi Coast coming in perpendicular to the shore, 25 knots with a 5-foot sea, and northerlies driving into the Bering Strait, 20 to 25 and 6-foot seas expected there. For Friday, a north and westerly wind continues and picks up for most of the Chukchi Coast, 20 to 25, 6 to 7-foot seas expected there, and westerlies pick up around Point Barrow with a 5-foot sea, 4-foot seas for the central and eastern Beaufort Seacoast with winds as high as 10 to 20 knots. The winds will be cold on Friday. A recap of tonight's weather. Snow is on the way for South Central and the Copper River Basin. Watch for that to develop as we get into tomorrow afternoon and tomorrow night. Also looking for snow around the middle Tanana Valley, Fairbanks communities, including places like North Pole. Winds will pick up again for parts of southeastern Alaska, not quite as strong as what you had today, but conditions are still going to be around as the next wave of weather continues to work your way toward Friday with a chance of thunderstorms along the outer coast. Snow will pass over South Central as we go through tomorrow night and into Friday. Thanks for watching.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Support comes from the University of Alaska College Savings Plan, helping you and your child save for college every step of the way, from diapers to diploma. More information at uacollegesavings.com.